football just moves on so quickly, and I don't want to say it's last chance saloon for Weston McKennie, but if it is to be Aston Villa, you really need to make sure that for him it's the right fit.
Hello and welcome back to the Villa Filler podcast. I am here as always with my good friend Dan Wiseman. Dan, we've had some much needed R&R. You've been in Athens, of all places. You were there for the Conference League. Obviously it wasn't to be for us, mate, but just, before we get into it, how was your experience, mate?
It was great, mate. It was great. You know what? It was really, really interesting, and obviously there was so many Villa fans out there. There were so many out there. I'm going to earmark it between 1,000 and 2,000. There was everywhere you went. There were clarets and blue shirts from basically the minute you arrived at the airport and to the moment you left. You were seeing claret blue shirts there, and so that was fantastic. I met some really nice people. There was a guy, I forgot to get his name, as I always do. How many times have you and I been in situations where amazing people come up to us and kind of share their love for the podcast, and you and I just both kind of panic, thank them, and then scurry away. So I'd forgotten to get his name, but there was a really nice guy on the plane. But about 2:00 in the morning last night, as I was looking particularly disheveled, came up to me and really perked me up, started talking about the podcast and everything like that. So to all the Villa fans that I got chatting to, if you're listening, it was great to meet you. We had some amazing people like Villa fans that were backpacking through Europe that had come well out of their way to get to Athens, hoping that the Villa would be there. Like some really amazing stories. And that side of it was absolutely great. The final was, football-wise, wasn't the best. I mean, you'll know better than me, mate. Obviously, Olympiacos very proudly from Piraeus, which is kind of technically not within Athens. And so there was this really bizarre thing where about 3 hours before the game, you could not get a taxi. No taxi companies were open. No shops were open. The bars closed. The restaurants closed. Athens was a ghost town. You were walking around the streets and there was nobody there. And we were all kind of looking around at each other this is really, they're about to play the first ever European Cup final in their history. There's nobody here. And then checked social media the following morning and found out there's 20,000 of them set in Piraeus. And so, yeah, I was very happy that they went. I was very happy. The locals were amazing. Anyone that you got talking to that mentioned Villa was very gracious, and this is what surprised me. You could be very forgiving if they were very quick to gloat and to make a joke about Villa. But every single fan I meant to, when Villa were amazing, they're a really good team. What a result! And that everyone I spoke to kind of got this sense that there was nobody else that could win that game against Villa. For them. So be in this competition, to have a final at the home of their next door neighbours at Athens, in their home city, their capital city of Greece, them to reach the semi-finals. From them, it almost got a sense of destiny. That really there was a narrative arc there that nobody could stand before. And when you saw those celebrations, it was hard to begrudge them that opportunity. So yeah, it was a rest and relaxation. Might not be the best word for it, but I'm back, sunburned, mildly hungover, and ready to get stuck in to a transfer rumor, mate.
Absolutely, mate. A load's happened since we've sort of both been away. And we're going to talk about some of the bigger and just more interesting names that have stuck out. We're not going to talk about Reece James, which has come out 30 minutes ago, because what even the hell? No. But, maybe we talk about that another time, but not today, mate, because this is the sort of biannual Weston McKennie, Matteo Guendouzi transfer rumor podcast, where I sit here until I'm blue in the face, trying to convince you guys that Weston McKennie is worth our time and money. I feel like now more than ever, Weston's stats and his performances have backed up everything I've been saying all along, and I've actually feel quite vindicated by the season that West's had. This goes 2.5 years back, doesn't it, mate? From us just assembling a wish list of players that we liked.
Yeah.
And Weston was somebody that I'd raised. I think it was before the move to Juventus, and things have been very up and down for West when you look at his time at Juve and Leeds, and he's now sort of riding a crest of a wave at Juventus. He's had a really good season, and Juventus fans will attest to that as well. The relegation, the half a season he spent in the Premier League with Leeds, I don't want to say like booked his ideas up, because I don't ever think that there was this sort of attitude or application problem that people tend to try and paint Weston with. But I think it really made him focus on his game, and there's a lot of aspects of his game that have improved tenfold since returning back to Turin. And the one thing that, we've lauded Emery for, and we've lauded the likes of Konsa, Kamara, Bailey, so many of the players in the squad, is tactical flexibility. And I think you would be hard-pressed to find a more flexible midfielder than Weston McKennie. He can play anywhere centrally from 8, 6, even 10 if he needs to. More comfortable, in my opinion, in that 8 position. And more often than not this season, you'll actually see he was deployed on the right side of the midfield in what was essentially a wing-back position for Allegri, famous of deploying that sort of 3-5-2, 3-4-3. And often, at times, over his fellow countryman, Tim Weah, who, if we're being completely honest, is probably more a right winger, but has been deployed in that right wing-back position many a time, both for Juventus and for Lille at his previous club. So he was actually keeping somebody out of the team that is, like, profile-wise, way more suited to the role that he was executing. And people will go, oh, well, Dan, why would we want Weston McKennie? He's not scored a single goal this season. But I'll tell you why, he's assisted 7. And again, given the positions that he's occupying, really impressive numbers, mate, because Weston McKennie in a Max Allegri Juventus system, Juventus have slightly had a good season, but the football has not been good by any stretch of the imagination, has overachieved, in my opinion, mate.
Mate, totally. It's remarkable, really, how little kind of general chatter there has been about him, considering he's been virtually ever present for Juventus this season. Not necessarily always as a starter, but, the 34 games he's played in the league this season, 4 in the Coppa Italia. It's domestically, he's been a real rock of their rotation, and it's quite interesting, given his kind of career path so far, that it still feels like this next club is really, really important for him. In that this needs to be the right choice. It really does. And what I will say for Weston McKennie is that, apart from his early decision to leave FC Dallas to deny himself a homegrown player contract with Dallas in MLS, and then to come to Schalke in the Bundesliga, almost every other career decision he's made since then has been, I think, a poor one. I think it's very hard to deny the lure of Juventus, but I think everyone can agree it probably came too early. I think there was a sense that he maybe missed a tier of a club between a Schalke. I think if he'd have gone to, a slightly higher team in the Bundesliga, if he'd have gone abroad, if he wanted to come to England, go to Italy, it felt like there kind of should have been a middle ground. But you can't begrudge him for coming to Juventus. Obviously, it's hard to really say that Leeds was a bad decision by any stretch of the imagination, but I also think, by the same token, you can definitely say it didn't work out. And so now he sits here, coming to the end of his Juventus contract. It doesn't seem like the club wants to renew. It looks all but a certainty that he'll leave this summer. This next career move is really, really important, and there's definitely a player in there. There really is, but as I say, you get the sense that unless he makes this next call, unless he really finds a club that he can call home, that, you're looking at him. Still only 25 years old. There's still so much time, but football just moves on so quickly. And I don't want to say it's last chance saloon for Weston McKennie, but if it is to be Aston Villa, you really need to make sure that for him it's the right fit. But I definitely do think that there's something in this. I think he fits the kind of the low cost element of the signings that in Soler and Barkley, and now in McKennie, for that kind of centre midfield role. All of them are in a very similar kind of position, in that you're not going to have to pay over the odds to get them.
No, absolutely, mate. Absolutely. I think it's important to note as well that if Weston had his way, he wouldn't leave Juventus because of the season he's just had. Over the past 6 months, there have been sort of ongoing contract talks. Juventus are keen to renew, but have consistently reportedly offered Weston less than he's currently earning. So, he's rightfully rejected those approaches, if the reports are to be believed, which again, why would you accept the pay cut when you've been doing the most? Like, maybe they should have got their contracts the other way around, Juve, but that's obviously a whole other debate. So it kind of feels like I don't want to say being forced out, but Juventus sort of touting him around. They're saying 30 million euros, come and get him. Newcastle are a club that are interested. I don't necessarily think that would be the right fit. I think, and it's kind of hard to know really with where we stand with the squad, right? Without knowing if there's going to be any outgoings or incomings. A lot of people saying this is Douglas Luiz's replacement. That's just flat out not the truth. But I can see Weston being somebody whose role at Villa, probably to begin with, kind of like Tielemans really, I kind of see it in the same vein. He's probably someone who isn't going to start a whole bunch of games right from the start. He's going to be a rotation piece. He's going to need to fight for his place in the squad. And obviously with European football coming up, you need strength, depth, quality as well. And, when I think as well, what's important to sort of preface this with a lot of other transfer rumour or links that we may be talking about, whether you rate him or not, Weston is instantly, maybe not within the top 3 best midfielders or even 4, but he's better at Villa, but he would be better than Donker. He'd be better than Chambers. He's going to be better than, I'm trying to think who else we even have. He's going to be better than Tim. There's possibly an argument he's better than JJ, albeit totally different profile. So it instantly you are improving the squad. And I think that is the lens we sort of need to look at that through. He's receiving 6.11 progressive passes per 90, puts him in the top 4 percentile. Making 2.39 clearances per 90 as well. So not only is he looking to sort of bring the play forward, but he's doing the dirty work as well, which is something I really like. And again, extremely versatile player. I've been banging this drum for years. Sanson, I got that one really wrong, but Weston McKennie is a hill I'm willing to die on. I would be really happy if this came through, mate.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot to like there. I think it's interesting that it was only actually when I was going back through our little subtle plug, our TikTok channel before today, just to kind of catch up where we've been at recently. That I realised, obviously Soler and Barkley, 2 incredibly similar players, profile-wise. I watched the Soler one, I think it was you, mate. You were kind of like, good on the ball, likes going forward, has a good kind of engine, an eye for a pass. And really, those 4 terms are applicable to either Barkley or Soler, really. And I think Weston is a little bit different. And so it is interesting in that I think he's actually probably more comparable to the player that we're going to be talking about next than he is to a Ross Barkley or a Carlos Soler. So it's interesting that these kind of 2 definitive types of a midfielder are starting to emerge.
Absolutely, mate. And Guendouzi, again, I don't really think there's much for us to sort of run through numbers-wise to provide context. You guys know there's been podcasts before as well where we've gone into much more detail about Guendouzi's profile. But this is quite an interesting one because I don't think he's had the best of seasons at Lazio, and I think there's been times where he's frustrated the Lazio fans with the sort of the petulance that he's known for. He can be a fantastic player, but as you pointed out, mate, he's definitely more of a similar profile to Weston than to either Barkley, Soler, or even any of the other midfielders that we have at the club or have necessarily been linked with. Where do you stand on this one, mate? Because there's obviously, Emery and Guendouzi have history. Whether that's good or not, I don't know. I think I was excited by this one at the time, but I think like value for money wise, these guys are going to both, be around a similar fee. same age, similar profile. I think there are upsides off the field when you talk about marketing and, reaching the United States that Weston has, which, is kind of unfair to compare with Guendouzi. But these are things that, won't necessarily be considered by Unai Emery, but the people signing the checks will go, yeah, that'll do. I'm pretty sure West's actually an Adidas athlete as well, which, again, is a potential factor there. Which is a more appealing prospect to you, mate? If you had to pick between the two?
That's a really good question. Because I think they're both going to come in at a very, very similar price point. I think it's very difficult for me to argue that a well-managed and almost like slightly more docile Guendouzi is a rare breed, really, in this day and age. A very, gnarly, battle-hardened, he snaps into challenges that we know. And I quite like that he has a little bit of a temper. I think it's really interesting that chaotic players attract chaotic clubs. And in Marseille and Lazio, you have two incredibly chaotic clubs. And I do like that, just for the narrative that he's kind of been out there. But yeah, it's hard to escape the idea that there is yet to really be a manager that's been able to put Matteo Guendouzi on a leash. And so it's interesting that Emery has kind of been put forward by the media as a manager that's keen to try and have another stab at that. It is also worth saying that generally, I think when we've seen transfer rumours, Nate, that have kind of extended over different eras of manager, like, you kind of topped the show by saying that we've had this conversation a lot. And it's not just under Unai Emery. I think this backdates him, and you kind of look at it, Steven Gerrard, and I'm not sure the back end of Dean Smith, but this has certainly been going on for quite some time. Normally there's something in that. When transfer rumours continue to roll on from different media outlets for, 12, 18, 24 months, you can usually give them a little bit more credence than, the Reece James that pops up half an hour ago, which is, almost nonsensical. It does feel like this one keeps coming back, and when that happens, it's not because there's essentially a little bit of truth to that.
Yeah, absolutely, mate. It's going to be interesting to see how this one plays out. I think added context as well, Daisuke Kamada looks to be on his way from Lazio to reunite with Oli Glasner at Palace. So I think there's that to consider as well, both playing a similar-ish position. Lazio really want to sell the two sort of attacking midfielders that they only signed last summer as well. That'll, there's definitely something at play there, but it'll be interesting to see how this one develops, mate. But, finally, there has been another midfielder for us to talk about who is similarly a goal threat, another American, one that I'm sure not many people have actually heard of, Rokas Pukstas. I think that's how it's pronounced. It's definitely not Puskás. If we were signing a Puskás regen, that'd be phenomenal, wouldn't it? But I've actually seen not too much, but I've seen a fair bit of Puskás just through work and having to monitor American players and whatnot. And he's a really exciting talent. And I think this is clearly, this signing is going to be in the sort of same vein as Nelkovic, obviously the right back that we signed in January. He's a young lad that clearly is not ready to play for Aston Villa right now, but only 19 years old. You're probably looking at a loan to a decent European side, maybe a championship side to toughen him up. But there's a lot of stocks in this guy in the US. A lot of people have this guy down as the next poster boy for American soccer. And I find it quite interesting, obviously, the total contrast in relatively big, dare I even say, household names in Weston and Matteo Guendouzi to Rokas here. But these are the signings that you probably should be a little bit more excited about. especially under Monchi, and really just seeing him get his teeth into young talent and seeing how we can develop them and then flip them in 5, 6, 7 years' time. This is definitely one to keep an eye out for, isn't it, mate?
Yeah, this is a great, sorry, it's a great example of another American player choosing a very similar path to Weston McKennie, in that he's left the States, he's come to Europe to kind of forge out a career, born in Oklahoma, but as you do, plays for Hajduk Split. That natural career progression. And it's really interesting to kind of see the position that he's forged out there as a real Swiss Army knife. He's played all over that team, but is predominantly a kind of box-to-box midfielder. So yeah, we're kind of talking about three players here who very much fit in I don't want to say an identical bracket, but definitely a very similar one. You've definitely seen more Pukstas than me. I'd heard of him, but I haven't watched too much Hajduk Split this season. I don't think too many people will begrudge me of that. But there's a really great report from the Football Talent Scout on Twitter, Jacek Kulik. It's a great account if you're not following it. I definitely recommend it. He's done a really good dive into this player that I'd recommend. If you're interested, you read. Says that he can play either side of wing back, which is great. DM, centre mid, and attacking midfield, so he can play 6, 8, or 10. And yeah, is quick, is good into the tackles, has a great work rate, quite technical, and as you say, very versatile. And it's interesting that they likened him in terms of they always give a kind of player comparison to a kind of an Aston Villa James Milner. James Milner in his earlier career, in that he is that kind of very dynamic, very engine-heavy kind of number 8 that can really kind of do it all. And so I think that's a really interesting comparison, because obviously a lot of people listen to this podcast will be able to kind of give some ground to the kind of like idea of the player that we're signing here. He's just 18 years old, so not necessarily that's the kind of standard that he could come in and replicate. But yeah, again, a very similar kind of player, but a player at a very different stage of their career. And I think it's interesting that we've kind of been asking Villa to do this for some time, to kind of skip the middleman and go direct to source. And we've started to do that with people like Nedeljkovic. Obviously, we've got, be interesting to see whether this preseason we get first eyes on Nino Sousa. We've done it now with John Duran. We're definitely starting to go cast our net a little bit further afield and put our faith in some of the great academies, the kind of little world football. And so we've kind of got a player here that already that wave of US MNT players, your McKennies, your Pulisic's, like all of those guys, your Tim Weyers is another one. Almost you've already got another generation that are kind of already coming through and ready to usurp them. I think, Gio Reyna is part of that. I think Pukstas is part of that. Yunus Musa is another great example. Ricardo Pepe has had a good season at PSV. And so already you've got this kind of new wave coming through. And so it's a really interesting dynamic that we've kind of got. It's crazy to say that Weston McKennie is the old guard of the USMNT, but this new wave is up and coming. And I have a lot of time for this age of American players that are really forging their craft abroad.
Absolutely, mate. It's about gaining experience, isn't it? And I think that's what's quite interesting. He's actually he's played a fair bit for the USMNT unders. He's played at the U20 World Cup last year. He scored 12 goals in 50 appearances for Hajduk Split. And I've got here that he was approached by Lithuania in 2022 to represent their senior team. So he would have only been 17 years old, maybe even 16, because I don't think it would have been his birthday by the time he was approached, which is absolutely crazy. And I guess just goes to speak about of the talent levels that he's got, to represent the senior team. Sorry, just to be super clear, they wanted him to play for the actual men's team, which is interesting. But yeah, this is probably the most exciting out of the three transfer rumours that we've discussed, if I'm being completely honest, mate. And be great to see how this one develops in 1 or 2 years' time, really, if this transfer does happen. But guys, let us know your thoughts in the comment section down below. What you think of all the guys we've discussed today, and if you're excited for the Euros as well, because it's coming around really quick, mate, isn't it?
It is. It's crazy, mate. And it's interesting with the kind of both of us have had a week or so off. And it's interesting, that's kind of the same as the players got. So, we're very much on the same timeline as those guys because all the boys are already linking up on international duty.
Yeah, mate. It was good to see Conser and Jack. So I'm sure you saw that photo England shared. That was, pulling on the heartstrings. But yeah, it's good. It's gonna be an exciting summer, mate. Plenty of transfer rumours. I don't think we'll see too many deals until after the tournament, to be perfectly honest. Unless it is something like a Puskás. But nevertheless, Dan and I will be here to cover that for you guys. So you're going to want to make sure you subscribe to the channel. If you listen on Apple or Spotify, follow, download, share with a friend. It helps out more than you could know. And yeah, Hajduk Villa.